Donald Trump is visibly panicking right now as the entire MAGA war narrative begins collapsing in real time. And the frantic damage control pouring out of his administration this morning tells you everything you need to know. Because the reality they're trying to hide is spiraling fast. The Strait of Hormuz, the most critical oil choke point on the planet, is effectively frozen, with the overwhelming majority of commercial shipping unable to pass through. Iranian retaliation is spreading across the region. American military assets are being targeted, energy markets are reacting instantly, and gas prices are already beginning to surge. And back here in the United States, the economic warning signs are flashing everywhere. Factory job losses are accelerating. Entire industries are bracing for layoffs. And a record number of Americans are now draining their retirement accounts just to survive an economy that is quietly sliding toward a jobs recession. But instead of honesty, what we're getting from Trump's regime is pure, grotesque gaslighting. His Treasury Secretary is going on television claiming the Middle East chaos is just exaggerated media hype. His Defense Secretary is openly bragging about unleashing overwhelming violence from the sky over Iran like some deranged action movie villain. And MAGA leaders in Congress are already scrambling to rewrite the story about why this war even started in the first place. When the narrative changes every 24 hours, you know the truth is getting dangerously close. And right now, the truth is becoming impossible for this administration to contain. Because what we're watching isn't strength. It's a regime sliding into panic. Let's start with the lie. Because the Trump administration is now trying to convince Americans that the Middle East is calm, controlled, and completely under their command. That the reports of chaos, escalation, and regional retaliation are somehow exaggerated media hysteria. That's the story they're selling this morning. But let's look at what they are actually saying out loud. Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, went on national television and tried to dismiss the growing crisis with a straight face. According to him, the region is not on fire. The explosions, the drone strikes, the missile attacks, the shipping crisis, those are supposedly just random incidents captured on someone's cell phone. Think about how absurd that sounds. Commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz is being severely disrupted. Iranian retaliation is hitting multiple targets across the region. Military installations tied to the United States are under threat. Global markets are reacting immediately. And yet the administration's explanation is basically, don't believe what you're seeing. That's not leadership, that's gaslighting. Now let's look at what Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is saying, because this is where the narrative becomes even more revealing. Instead of calming the situation, Hegseth is openly boasting that the United States now controls Iran's airspace and waterways. He's bragging that American bombers, drones, and fighter jets are dominating the skies over the region and striking targets relentlessly. That's not defensive language, that's the language of escalation. And then he takes it even further, describing how American forces are unleashing destruction from the sky day after day, while Iran supposedly has no ability to respond. You almost have to stop and ask yourself, who exactly does he think that messaging is for? Because if your goal is stability, that's not how you talk. But the contradictions don't stop there. Just days ago, MAGA leaders were arguing that the United States had to strike first because Iran might attack after Israel acted. That was the justification. Preemptive defense. Now suddenly, the story has changed. Speaker Mike Johnson is going on television claiming that Iran actually declared war on the United States first. Not that America launched the operation, but that Iran forced America's hand. So which version are we supposed to believe? Did the United States act first to prevent a threat, or did Iran start the war? Because both stories cannot be true at the same time. And when the narrative starts shifting this quickly, when the explanation changes every few days, it's usually because the people in charge are trying to keep up with a reality that is spiraling beyond their control. And that's exactly what this looks like right now. Now, let's slow this down and actually look at what's happening beneath the propaganda, because once you start putting the pieces together, the picture becomes far more disturbing. Start with the military escalation. According to the administration's own briefings, the United States has now launched sustained air operations over Iranian territory. Strategic bombers, drones, and fighter aircraft are operating continuously in the region, striking targets and maintaining air dominance. Think about what that means for a moment. This isn't a limited strike. This isn't a short defensive response. This is a sustained military campaign. And the Defense Department is now openly acknowledging that this campaign may last weeks, possibly more than 8 weeks, depending on what Donald Trump decides. Let that sink in. The timeline of an entire war is now being framed as whatever the president personally decides the tempo should be. That's not strategy, that's magical thinking. And while the administration is trying to project confidence, the logistical reality is already starting to crack through the surface. Because while officials claim the United States has unlimited capacity to sustain this operation, reports are emerging that the Pentagon is now requesting an emergency supplemental of roughly $50 billion to replenish munitions. $50 billion. If everything is going so perfectly, why are they suddenly scrambling for emergency funding? You don't request emergency war funding when you're comfortably in control. You request it when you're burning through weapons at a pace that was never part of the original plan. And then there's the incident that barely received the attention it deserved. A United States Navy submarine reportedly torpedoed and sank an Iranian naval frigate operating near the waters off Sri Lanka. This wasn't some minor skirmish. The ship was carrying a full crew, and dozens of sailors were reportedly killed when it went down. Step back and think about that. This is the first time since World War II that a United States submarine has sunk an enemy warship with a torpedo. That is not a small development. That is the kind of escalation that signals a conflict has moved into an entirely new phase. And yet the administration is simultaneously trying to tell Americans that nothing extraordinary is happening. Gross. You can't pretend a war isn't expanding while announcing events that historically only happen during major conflicts. But the military situation is only one part of the story, because while this war narrative is dominating headlines, the domestic economic consequences are already hitting Americans directly. Gas prices are rising as instability spreads through global oil markets. Manufacturing job losses are accelerating across the United States. And perhaps most alarming of all, financial data now shows a record share of American workers withdrawing money from their 401k retirement accounts just to cover emergency expenses. Think about the scale of that problem. Retirement savings are supposed to be the last line of financial security, the money people rely on decades later, and yet Americans are pulling that money out right now simply to survive the current economic conditions. That's not normal. That's what happens when an economy is quietly sliding into crisis. But when Trump officials are confronted with these numbers, they don't accept responsibility. Instead, they reach for the same tired scapegoats: immigrants, global conspiracies, the media, anything except the obvious reality that their policies are failing. And that's where this entire situation begins to look less like a carefully planned strategy and more like something far more chaotic. A government escalating a war abroad while the economic foundation at home is beginning to crack. And the more closely you examine the facts, the more it becomes clear that the administration isn't controlling events. They're reacting to them, and reacting badly. And here's the thing that makes this entire situation even more revealing. This isn't just one bad decision. It's not one reckless speech. It's not one policy failure. It's a pattern. A pattern that follows Donald Trump everywhere he goes. Because if you zoom out for a moment, the same chaos we're seeing in foreign policy right now is exactly the same chaos that has defined Trump's entire career. From his businesses to his politics to the way he governs. Let's remember who we're talking about here. This is the same man whose casinos collapsed in bankruptcy. The same man whose stakes business failed. The same man whose universities were shut down in fraud cases. The same man who left a trail of lawsuits, unpaid contractors, and collapsed ventures stretching back decades. Failure isn't the exception with Trump, it's the business model. And now that same reckless mindset is being applied to international conflict. Instead of careful diplomacy, we get bombastic rhetoric about raining destruction from the skies. Instead of coalition building, we get impulsive threats and chest-pounding war language designed for television clips. It's governing by rant. And while all of that spectacle is happening, Americans are dealing with the consequences. Workers are watching jobs disappear in manufacturing and construction sectors. Families are paying higher prices for fuel and basic goods as global markets react to instability. Retirement savings are being drained just to cover everyday expenses. This is what real economic stress looks like. But the MAGA political machine doesn't acknowledge any of that reality. Instead, they distract. They blame immigrants, they blame the media, they invent conspiracies about global elites, while billionaires inside their own administration push policies that benefit the wealthiest class in America. It's the oldest political trick in the book. Create chaos, then tell people someone else is responsible. And yet, despite all of that propaganda, something interesting is starting to happen politically. Voters are paying attention. Look at what just happened in Texas. In a state that MAGA politicians assume belongs permanently in their column, Democratic turnout in a major primary actually exceeded Republican turnout. Millions of voters showed up, and Democrats made significant gains among Latino communities across several districts. That is not supposed to happen in Texas midterm politics. Political analysts are already calling the numbers extraordinary, because when voters who normally stay home suddenly show up in large numbers, it usually means one thing. People are fed up. Fed up with the chaos, fed up with the lies, fed up with leaders who treat governing like a reality television spectacle while ordinary Americans struggle just to stay financially afloat. And that's the bigger context here. The war rhetoric, the economic denial, the constantly shifting narratives, none of it exists in isolation. It's all part of the same collapsing political project, a movement built on outrage, misinformation, and the promise that one man alone can fix everything. But reality has a way of breaking through propaganda eventually. And right now, that reality is starting to pile up faster than the MAGA machine can spin it, which is why the tone coming out of this administration is getting more frantic by the day. Because when the narrative stops working, panic usually follows. And when you step back and look at everything happening right now, the war escalation, the economic warning signs, the constantly changing stories coming out of Washington, it all comes down to a very simple difference. The difference between truth and propaganda. Because the American people are being told that everything is under control, that the economy is strong, that the war is going exactly as planned, and that anyone questioning the narrative is just spreading fake news. But facts have a way of exposing lies. Markets react to reality. Workers react to reality. Voters react to reality. And right now, the reality is becoming harder and harder for this administration to hide. A government that gaslights its own citizens while escalating conflicts abroad is not demonstrating strength. It's demonstrating desperation. And that's why independent media matters more than ever. If you want honest analysis that cuts through the propaganda, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're pushing toward the next major milestone together, and every subscription helps grow a community that values facts over spin. Because democracy depends on informed citizens, and the truth still matters.